This is a sort of video process for my quick samurai sculpture. Please check my website, link in the description for more background and process pictures as well as finalized shots. This is my first time making a video like this, and I promise they'll improve more. I sure hope so. So I've already constructed the head and I've accounted for the space the LED will take up. So from this point, the main objective is to carve in a groove for the LED structure to go inside. Why am I doing it this way? Because Sculpey, the pinkish material, needs to bake in the oven to harden or cure. I've soldered a LED diode to regular wire and I wasn't sure if the whole thing could sit in the oven, so I've decided to do them as separate pieces. In theory, both of them should be able to handle temperatures higher than 275 degrees, but I wasn't sure, even though the solder runs much hotter than that. Please correct me if I'm wrong though. Regardless, there are plastic bits such as the switch and battery holder, and it probably isn't a good idea to have them in the oven. I'm getting sidetracked. So, I built up a foundation for the torso with epoxy sculpt that was fully cured and used a Dremel and files to make sure the groove was wide enough for it to fit. You may see me do a few test fits. I also attached a few armature wires. They're really only there to help me hold and place more epoxy sculpt to build up, but because I did it this way, as long as I keep that back channel clear, I can bake this as many times as I want. Now I can attach bits of Sculpey and adhere them to the surface of the epoxy sculpt and build them out. For certain surfaces, Sculpey has a tendency to not stick, which is where you can use the Sculpey liquid or just glue it on if you're brave enough. I'm using Sculpey Soft here, but I used to regularly use medium firmness as it can hold more detail and I'm less likely to accidentally mush it. But I bought this box of Sculpey Soft years ago and I'm still running through it. Now normally I would, or rather I should, create a full armature to set to a base so I don't have to keep picking it up. However, I really am going by ear on this one as I haven't even made a sketch for this. I also did not plan out how I would be disguising the wires, so I decided to hold off until I finish the torso, which housed the wire in the first place. Then I can build the rest up with epoxy sculpt so I don't have to bake it because it cures completely hard. And now you're about to see a big jump in progress because I worked off stream and off camera. I stream myself working on projects on Twitch, but I feel like this would be better done off stream on my own time. So I drilled holes into a wooden base, glued on wires, and set it up so I can build it up with epoxy sculpt. Now, this is actually the second diode, because the one you see in the video actually failed after I put epoxy sculpt, and it cured. I would have spent more time cutting through the epoxy sculpt instead of just soldering another one, despite that I am terrible at soldering. Honestly, I think I could have cut the working time by a quarter to a half if soldering didn't give me so much trouble. I also realized I needed to have him hold a katana. Now, the easy way would just be to find the prop, have something close enough, or just, fudge it. But I thought, you know what? I've got some popsicle sticks lying around, I can make a katana. And it wasn't flat. I made a Suba, Habaki, Tsukaito, and eventually a Kashira along with the sheath. Now that that's all figured out, my goal is to go in and clean up as much of it as I can within the time frame. I also add more epoxy sculpt to build up unfinished areas or add more detail. I've created hands to hold both parts of the katana and went ahead and attached them to the sculpture. In the future, I might wait to do something like this till later because it made it a bit difficult to get into certain spaces and I kept stabbing myself with it. Around this time, let me talk about some pitfalls I encountered during this from poor planning as well as design goals. For starters, because his mask is so bulky and I made the body second, his head does look slightly too large. This makes him look a little shorter, but it's not terrible. Also, if you look at his right foot, that's where I've hit the wire. I had to improvise a little bit by adding a small incline that his foot is perched on because it would be too sharp of an angle for the wire. This could also have been solved by better planning, but this is a learning project. Or so I tell myself. I was also going to add a straw hat or something, but I just couldn't make it look good, and it made his head even larger. These problems could have been solved with time, but I decided it would not be worth it. You can also see on the neck some paint already, and that was me testing the opacity of primer and paint so I can control what areas bleed light and which don't. I want mainly the eyes and mouth to glow, and right now the neck area completely bleeds light, which is something that looks cool, but isn't what I'm going for. I finished details on the legs, and I'm still very paranoid about the solder breaking, so I kept testing it constantly. And with everything just about finalized, it was time to paint. I taped off the sword and sheath to avoid getting paint on it and gave everything a base coat of gray primer. I recently picked up airbrushing, so it's something I'm still trying to figure out, and I encountered my fair share of problems, namely my internal struggle of my airbrush getting clogged. To be honest, I've been watching a bunch of Miniac videos on tips and advice. That's really my only source of information. So thank you, Miniac. Oh, and right here I'm showing off my tools because a viewer asked about it, and it's really an accumulation of things from art stores and swap meets and random places. For example, I like dental tools because they're durable and have very nice shapes to work with. So from here on, it's basing time. This was my first time making a base or a diorama of sorts. I started with putting coats of basing glue. I bought fake miniature rocks off Amazon as well as a few basing stuff for army dioramas such as dirt and grass tufts, and they worked pretty well. I mixed the fake dirt with a bag of tiny rocks from Michael's. For the tall grass, I dismantled the paintbrush and hot glued parts of it down. You'll see me bust out some feathers later, and that's because I was trying to go for Japanese pampas grass or Suzuki grass, and it just made so much of a mess and was not working well enough to warrant the mess. And I added some little tufts of flowers as well. As far as the model's colors, I went with red because that was the mental image I had. I debated which color to make the outer robe and eventually settled on a deeper red, which you will see later. I tried colors like white, navy, and brown, but they clashed too much with the earthy tone. I even thought about layering it with straw, but decided against it. For the armor, I put a brown base coat, layered it with a darker red, and dry brushed a lighter red. Then I added scuffs and scratches, but unfortunately it took all the layers. I resprayed some areas with a light brown, however. On a similar note, I planned to make all the armor pieces out of wood or stacked pieces, but wasn't able to get a satisfactory result and ended up scrapping it. In the future, I would like to figure out a way to disguise the power switch and battery a little more. I thought about cutting a groove into the bottom of the base, but then I would have a hard time changing the battery. Plus, I don't have any power tools larger than a Dremel. I would also like to build up a bigger basing material collection because this is something where the more variation and inventory you have, the more interesting and convincing thing you can make. In my mind, I wanted to make really tall grass that was cut in inorganic ways to show a story such as there being a battle and the samurai character cut it. In general, I would wanted to add more story elements, but I felt like adding them in now would feel misplaced. So, this is it in its completed state, and I have some final thoughts. Am I happy with it? I'm happy with what I've learned, however, I am not totally satisfied with the piece. There are parts that are very rough, and while this was about a 1-week project give or take, especially how long soldering had occupied me, I am trying to get to the level where I can bust out pieces within this time frame with more polish and consistency. As far as this video goes, it's unlikely that it will even get much attention, however I am glad that I made it and I learned a lot. Because now that I have the creation process, I can frame future projects in a way that it was designed to be recorded, and I know what areas I need to fill, and I do need to figure out which areas I can cut out, because I don't know if a super sped up time lapse is enjoyable to watch, but I don't think people will watch a 30-minute video. I also want to inject my own style and humor more. But thank you so much for watching. Please leave any feedback, tips, criticism. My next video will be on the Taken Wizard from Destiny 2. You might have seen it in a few shots. Alright, thank you.